Kia ora koutou katoa. Summer is gone in the blink of an eye and autumn is here. February has been such a strange month for this area in New Zealand. It's been so wet, we've even had flooding, and it's definitely felt colder. Despite the rain, it has still felt like harvest season. We're continually halving the vegetables as they're ready, and at the moment the kitchen is a workstation full of pots and jars for preserving. The garden is a jungle, but it is full of life and really abundant. We're getting plenty of tomatoes despite this colder February, and we're trying to keep on top of them before the rains come. Tomatoes split in the rain, which I've heard can actually be an evolutionary advantage for the tomato. So as it splits, when it's ripe and wet, the seeds then drop and are ready to germinate. I thought with so much wet weather it would encourage a lot of disease, particularly in the tomatoes, but I've been pleasantly surprised about how little they've been affected. My theory is that it's been down to having really good healthy soil, the heirloom varieties, and some of the tomatoes that were in the garden came from seeds I saved last year. This means that the plants were best suited for this particular garden, and they've passed their genes on to make this next generation. I've been slowly delving a bit more into seed saving. It's this ancestral pact we've had with veggies for thousands of years. You feed me, and in return I'll help you grow and ensure your line passes on to the next generation. Tomatoes are quite easy. You essentially wait until the fruit is ripe, you scoop all the pulp and clean all the seeds, dry them, and then store them in a dry place like an envelope. There's also a fermentation method, which means seed can keep for years for you to use, but I'll be using my seeds for next year, so that method will just do me fine. When you let heirloom varieties flower and go to seed, the seeds then drop in the ground and they wait until the conditions are right until they germinate. This is a great signal for when the seasons are changing or when growing conditions are right for other vegetables. For example, I've got heaps of daikon and bok choy and lettuce that just continually self-seeds. I'm learning to watch Mother Nature, and I think when the bok choy pop up, it's a signal that it's time to start thinking about winter brassicas, but also that the white butterfly are coming soon. Now, just letting things go unfortunately doesn't always work. This is because plants can cross-pollinate. So I left some of my purple sprouting broccoli to flower last year, but I was also a bit complacent and left one of my Brussels sprout plants to flower for the bees. So while they look very different, they're actually members of the same species, just different varieties. So this means they can cross-pollinate, but what can happen is then they produce a seed and a plant that isn't quite right and maybe doesn't produce the vegetables you want. I've sort of left it anyway. I'm gonna watch what happens with the purple sprouting broccoli seedlings and just wait and see. I have some zucchini that have been in the ground since late October, and they've been producing for us since early December. With the wet weather, they're finally getting some powdery mildew, a fungal disease, but again, they've been resistant for ages despite the wet weather. I've left some fruit to fully mature on these plants, which I'll eventually scoop out to save the seeds for next year. This variety does so well here, and I'm sure anyone that's growing zucchini knows a few plants can give you an absolute gluttony, and then you blink your eye and suddenly you've got a whole heap of marrows. The zucchini and tomatoes have been put to good use, and I've been making heaps of passata, and I've made a really nice chutney with them. My fail this year has been beans and corn. Beans are easy, they say. I guess I just don't have the knack for them. While we've had a few meals with beans, they just haven't done very well and haven't got as much as I expected to. I'm not sure exactly what's gone wrong there. The corn was completely my fault. I harvested some for dinner the other night, feeling very pleased with myself. I picked these beautiful yellow cobs and got cooking them and couldn't wait to have the sweet, juicy sweet corn that I'd grown myself. And then I went to take a bite and I immediately had to spit it out. It was hard and dry. I'd left it on the plant for way too long and it was inedible. But nothing wasted. Because they're mature, it's meant I can save some seeds to then use for next year. And also, the chooks aren't fussy. They don't mind the corn. I've also noticed a lot of green stink bugs around this year, which are a real pest in the garden. I do squash them as I see them, but I don't use pesticides as this kills all the beneficial life too. I do wonder if the stink bugs had any impact on the corn or the beans, but I don't know. I'm still getting a steady harvest of cucumbers and pickles. I've been trying to perfect the dill pickle and I think I'm almost there. I'm also trialling a few late potatoes and going to see how they do. Pumpkins have gone okay. I've got a modest harvest. I've heard trimming off the crawling parts helps them focus the energy into the fruit, so I might do that next year and see if that helps with the harvest. I've been slowly sowing seeds in preparation for winter, and I have some cabbages, kale, cauliflower and broccoli in the ground now. They're all under mesh netting to prevent the white butterfly from decimating it. And my next battle when the white butterfly go will be the slugs, and that's where the ducks come in. Today I'm getting a few cabbages out in a new bed, laid out with compost and pea straw. I always water in a bit of diluted seaweed tonic to give them a good start. I've run out of netting to prevent the white butterflies, so I'll just have to keep an eye on them and squash any caterpillars as I see them. I'm hoping they're big enough to withstand a bit of damage and hold out until the white butterfly passes. Last year's lambs have now been separated from their mums, but they haven't really cared, if I'm honest. We like to sort of wait until they seem to have naturally weaned themselves. I'm going to give a couple of the girls a break this year, particularly one of our ewes, Molly, who produced 2 sickly lambs. She lost a lot of weight and one of the lambs sadly died. So since she's had the pressure of that lamb off her now though, she has put on a bit more weight, but I don't want to be using her genetics in the flock again. Ron, our ram, is in his happy place again. He's reunited with the girls. It was maybe a bit voyeuristic of me to watch, but it was quite sweet seeing him give a few little kisses and nibbles and smooch up against one of the ewes before he gets down to business. You know what can I say? Ron's a romantic. There is so much feed for this time of year. This time last year we have hard, dry, brown grass. But with all the rain and then periods of sun, it's been like the middle of spring. So if anything, I've got to keep an eye on the sheep to make sure they don't get too fat. In the last week, I butchered one of our Orpingtons, Ember. She was one of 2 of the first hens we ever got on this whole journey. We travelled after work one night over 4 hours to the Hawke's Bay and back to get them, because at the time that was the only place we could get the breed. She has provided us with countless eggs, and I'm sure she's passed her genes into our flock of chooks. She gradually developed a breathing difficulty over time, and we do want to use our chickens for both eggs and meat, so it did make the most sense to butcher her. This is while she was still in reasonably good health and before she got too sickly, so we couldn't use her meat. It might sound weird to spend years nurturing an animal to then kill it, but it's quite the opposite for me. It's what we've done for thousands of years and only recently have become quite disconnected from the whole process. I believe it actually lends to more respect for life. It limits food waste because you see how much goes into raising an animal, so you don't want to waste anything. It also means I know she's had a really good life, hanging out with the other chickens, raising her own chicks, and foraging over acres and acres of land. This is compared to if I was buying supermarket meat, where the hen would have likely been in a really crowded space. It would have been bred to have unnaturally accelerated growth, and it wouldn't have been able to carry out its natural foraging behaviours either. Her body has nourished us so much. We've had 4 meals out of her. I made a really delicious red curry. It was so good. We've even made some stock from boiling her carcass over a day and used some of that stock in a risotto last night, and we still have 4 litres left that we can use now in other meals. I also butchered a ram lamb, and he'll provide enough lamb for us for the rest of the year. Reality is, one of the reasons we have sheep is for their meat, and he's had a really peaceful, quick death, and I'm so incredibly grateful that he'll nourish us. Probably from the outside looking in, the food forest looks a bit wild and messy, but I like it that way. To kind of let nature do its thing and follow its lead. It encourages biodiversity in which then everything benefits, including my garden around it. It often feels like nothing's growing or changing. I'm trying to be so patient. But actually, when I do look back over old photos, the forest is slowly establishing and growing. It's just going to take time. There are natives like harakeke and kowhai, which will attract native birds like tui, amongst fruit trees that will eventually feed us. A really key player in this forest is tree lucerne, or tagaste, I think it's pronounced, which I'm sure anyone who's considered a food forest has heard of. It's a relatively fast growing tree that can provide shelter for other plants that are developing, and it also fixes nitrogen, which improves the quality of the soil. Some of these trees have at least tripled in height since I planted them only a year or two ago. So now autumn is here. It's the last burst of busyness with harvesting everything, preserving it, and then getting everything in the ground while it's still warm enough to establish and grow. And then before I know it, I'll be putting out garlic bulbs again, and the cycle will continue. It just feels really right and natural to be working alongside the seasons and with Mother Nature. Thank you if you did make it this far watching, and I might see you for another video again when the seasons change. Ka kite anō.